When should freedom of speech be considered criminal? Welcome to the last dispensation. Let's get into this. You're living in it. Wait,
Welcome to the last dispensation.
you're living in it. Let's get into this. Freedom of speech and the law. A Latter-day Saints perspective. That's right. In a recent case of the Idaho man who made disturbing comments and acted inappropriately, it's clear that his behavior was unacceptable. However, as troubling as his actions were, the prosecutors have decided not to file criminal charges against him. This raises an important question. When should freedom of speech be considered criminal? Now, as Latter-day Saints, we believe in the fundamental right to free expression. The 12th article of faith states that we, quote, believe in being subject to kings, presidents, rulers, and magistrates, in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law, close quote. While we must always condemn hateful speech and actions, and it's horrible. I wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that. And in the past, I remember when I grew up in the 80s and the 70s, even in the 70s, I was a young boy in the 70s and a teenager in the 80s. We would look at people like that and we all knew it was wrong. They would be escorted out of a building or whatever. But we knew they had the right to say that because we always wanted our rights defended. If we wanted to say things that disagreed with others, it was just kind of a thing. Our Constitution was there and it protected people from being imprisoned for even hateful remarks. So while we must always condemn that kind of behavior, we must also be careful not to infringe on the constitutional rights that protect us all. President Dallin H. Oaks has taught that the free exercise of religion and the freedom of speech are both fundamental to our way of life. President Oaks has also cautioned that we must be careful not to let our zeal for one freedom undermine the other. Think about that. Think about that a lot. This delicate balance is crucial as we navigate complex issues of freedom of speech and public discourse. The Apostle Paul reminds us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Our battle is not against individuals. It's not against you and I, but it's against forces of evil and tyranny that seek to divide, conquer, and destroy. As we stand firm in our faith, we must also extend compassion and seek to understand those with whom we disagree. In the end, we must remember that the glory of God is intelligence and that the free exchange of ideas, even those we find abhorrent, brothers and sisters, I don't agree with what this person did. Of course I don't. We find it abhorrent. And I want to let our young people know that those of us who love the Constitution, there's an old saying, I may not like what you say, but I will defend your right to say it because I want my rights defended as well. And you have every right to speak out and say things that I might find even sickening. I mean, we do draw a line, like you don't yell fire in a crowded building when the building's not on fire, right? That's criminal. It's not freedom of speech. And that one time, vulgarity, pornography wasn't considered freedom of the press and freedom of expression either. But freedom of speech is essential for a healthy society. While we must always condemn hate and violence, we must also protect the fundamental rights that make us a free and just people.
Freedom of speech, the ability to express yourself. It's a cherished idea, as well it should be. Most of us who live in liberal Western democracies think of it as a basic human right. People have fought and died for it. But now we may be in danger of losing it. The threat is not coming from without, from external enemies, but from within. A generation is being raised not to believe in freedom of speech, but rather that they should have freedom from speech they dislike. This is a threat to both pluralism and democracy itself. We see this in Europe, where sensitivity-based censorship attempts to ban anything deemed hateful or even just hurtful, and to ban criticism of religion, especially Islam. But the United States, despite its strong constitutional protections in the Bill of Rights, is far from immune from the rising trend of suppression of speech, or what is sometimes called political correctness. This is especially true at America's colleges and universities, the place where our future leaders are educated and where you'd expect speech to be the most free. Highly restrictive speech codes are now the norm on campus, not the exception. According to a study by my organization, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, FIRE, 54% of public universities and 59% of private universities impose politically correct speech codes on their students. And thanks to recent Department of Education guidelines, 100% of colleges may adopt speech codes in the coming years. How bad is it? At a public campus in California on Constitution Day in 2013, a student who also happens to be a decorated military veteran was told he could not hand out copies of the Constitution to his fellow students. The objection from the university was not ideological. It was out-of-control bureaucracy imposing limits on speech. That same day, another college student in that same state was told he could not protest NSA surveillance outside of a tiny free speech zone, an area that comprised only 1.37% of the campus. Months later, college students in Hawaii were told both they could not hand out the Constitution to their fellow students, and that they could not protest NSA policies outside the school's free speech zone. FIRE took these colleges to court, but the fact that we had to shows you how bad it has become. Recently, students and sympathetic faculty have joined forces to exclude campus speakers whose opinions they dislike. At FIRE, we call this disinvitation season, although the season lasts all year round. Since 2009, there has been a major uptick in the push by students and faculty to get speakers they dislike disinvited. These speakers have included former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, the Somali-born feminist and critic of Islam Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and the director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde. And that's only the obvious part of the disinvitation problem. Few conservative speakers are invited to speak at colleges lest they have to be disinvited later. The newest threat to speech comes from so-called trigger warnings, alerts that warn students that they are about to read or hear something that triggers a negative emotional response. A 2014 New York Times article cited the example of a Rutgers student requesting trigger warnings for the classic American novel The Great Gatsby because it, quote, possesses a variety of scenes that reference abusive, misogynistic violence, unquote. Recently, Oberlin College attempted to institute a policy that heavily encouraged the faculty to avoid difficult topics and to employ trigger warnings as a means of making classrooms safer. Safety has been watered down to essentially mean the right to always feel comfortable. New demands for trigger warnings are popping up on campuses across the country. Add in popular academic theories that encourage students to scrutinize speech for microaggressions, any statement that might be construed as racially insensitive, classist, sexist, or otherwise un-PC, and it's clear that campuses are teaching students to police what they say. This is precisely the opposite of what is needed. Our society needs candor, and it needs freedom of speech, not freedom from speech. Intellectual comfort is not a right, nor should it ever be. Not if we want freedom of speech. Let's just call it freedom to survive. I'm Greg Lukianoff, president of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education for Prager University.
Now, we're supposed to keep our minds and our hearts clean and have good, wholesome thoughts. But I notice those comedians that want to express themselves any way they want. And in other words, they're going into a private setting and most of the audience is there to watch them and agree with them. You shouldn't have one or two people get up and tell them they're not allowed to say those things. And I understand what they're getting at. This cancel culture thing is bad, but we should still keep our thoughts and our minds and our hearts clean. But once again, I defend the right for those comedians to express themselves in a private place and even in public. So before I sign off, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. I'd also like to hear from you. Please comment in the comments section. What is your idea of freedom of speech? Should it just be certain things because ideologically both sides have been wrong at times. Go back to the 50s and 60s where the Christian right, there was a time where they stifled the voices of even classic liberals whom I miss. Some of your classic liberals today call themselves conservative Republicans because now we have like the left. And then the other side is doing it as well. So either, no matter what ideology you subscribe to, we can become overbearing on those who we disagree with at times. And I would say mostly people in high places. So comment in the comment section. Let me know where you think I'm missing the mark or missing the point. But be nice. Don't attack. And don't spam your channel. Okay? Stop spamming. I let people you don't advertise your channel in somebody's comment section, especially if you haven't been on their program and asked that. I understand if you're dropping like, you should watch. I understand big channels, like if you're saying, hey, you need to go check out this video because it maybe complements what I'm talking about or something. But other than that, don't advertise on somebody's platform. It's not kosher. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so through Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal. And I also have some great products available that help support the program. Ham radios. Check out the ham radios. You should get into ham radio. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next round.